Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining this pre-recorded webinar about the Village of Cumberland's liquid waste management plan. The project team has been working on stage 3 of the liquid waste management plan, which is the final stage, since the summer of 2024, and we're nearing completion. This update today will provide a final check-in, reporting back on proposed approaches and results of some technical assessments before the report is drafted and submitted to the province for review. My name is Colleen, and I'm here just to help facilitate this webinar today. And with me is the LWMP Coordinator, Paul Nash, who is our expert and who will be walking us through the details. So once again, thanks for joining us to listen in. And with that, I'll hand the mic over to Paul.
Thanks, Colleen. Yes, here we are at Public Open House number 9 for this LWMP process. So, and this is the last one of our public engagement process as we complete the third and final stage of this. So, what I'm going to go through here in today's presentation, the LWMP history, what we're doing today, what's going to be in the final report, a little bit of an update on the environmental impact study, what came out of it. And then these 3 points in bold here is sort of the main part of today's presentation. What we're seeking input from the public about is how quickly to do the separation program. So details on that, and then we'll finish off with how it goes from here. So with that, dive right into it. So what is this process? LWMP, which is a lot easier to say than Liquid Waste Management Plan. Right, provincially defined process for developing a long-term plan for managing water and other liquid wastes. And a key point for all of this is it is not just a strategic plan, it is a regulatory authorization. And it's not just an authorization, it's an obligation. So once this plan is in place, it actually then comes with legal force that says we have to do certain things and to certain standards. And then the third leg of it is a financial plan that allows us to pay for doing those certain things. So it's not just a strategic plan like a parks master plan or other municipal plans. This one is unique in that it is also a regulatory plan and a financial plan, all wrapped up into one beast. And before we got into developing this beast, a few other things happened in Cumberland in the distant, not so distant past. Probably the key point for this history diagram here is when the sewers were first installed back in 1910, we had this combined storm and sanitary system. And combined sewers are something invented by the ancient Romans over 2,000 years ago. Everything went into a pipe and went to a river or the ocean. And it was only in 1968 for Cumberland that the wastewater treatment lagoons were constructed. And at about that time, they stopped doing combined sewers and started building separated storm and sanitary sewers. And you're not allowed to build a combined sewer system today. It's a thoroughly outdated system, but parts of it still exist and haunt us still. Then over other years, we did more work on studies on how to do the wastewater treatment. And we finally started this liquid waste management plan process in 2016. We had public committees going, open houses, etc. And that led to the lagoon upgrade project that is in progress. And I've got an update on that in just a minute. And then here we are in the final stage of the LWMP to wrap up the planning process. So over a century of history here, and yeah, how it started out with the combined storm and sanitary is what we're going to finish our discussion on here today. So it's come full circle. The LWMP process itself, 3 stages. We did the first stage 1 and 2, 2016, 17, 18. And you start out with broad thinking to identify everything and all the ideas and options. And then in stage 2, we whittle it down and select our preferred option, which we did back in the day about the lagoon upgrades. And then stage 3, here we are now, detailed study. And in Cumberland's case, we actually started work on the upgrades. They're in progress because we are well and truly out of compliance and need to get into compliance as quickly as we can. So once we'd worked out what we're going to do, we started that, and here we are finishing off the rest of the plan, even though work is already underway. And what was this work that's underway? What is it? The lagoon system. The main reason why we decided to stay with lagoon treatment instead of mechanical treatment plant is that it can handle very high flows, which is a defining feature of Cumberland. There's only one type of mechanical treatment plant available that can do an equivalent job with high flows, and we concluded we're better off to stay with the lagoons and add tertiary treatment to them. Treatment system size for a future population of 8,000 people, and that's the 20-year planning horizon, what Cumberland's population is expected to be. In extreme wet weather, excess flow bypasses tertiary treatment but still gets disinfected. More about that a little bit later. But yeah, it happens about every second year where the weather is extreme enough that it would cause that with our new system. We had these aspirational goals from the planning process of pharmaceutical removal and to use the water in the adjacent wetlands, and we'll be doing that. And then the last one here that came up in 2021, seismic upgrade, where we'll infill the channel and create a new one. The creek being right next to the lagoon berms is not a good thing from a seismic point of view. And we all got a good reminder just last week about seismic planning is not just a theoretical aspect. We actually do get some real earthquakes here. So that got added into the mix. And here's what it's going to look like when it's built. We're underway already, but we have the two lagoons. Down at the bottom there, the three colored boxes represent the post-lagoon treatment to turn the medium quality lagoon water into high quality disinfected effluent. And then it will get sent up the left here, the blue arrow, and in dry weather, or the first part of the flow goes to the reed bed. And when we have moderate to high wet weather flows, some of it will bypass the reed bed and go into the wetland directly, and it follows the dotted line and then over to the creek. In extreme wet weather conditions, down the bottom right here, the dotted yellow line, this is water that when our tertiary treatment capacity is full in wet conditions, any extra water that is coming in or out of the system gets disinfected and goes directly to the creek. So these extreme wet weather conditions still happen. It's unavoidable in Cumberland, so we have to have a system to do that. And then over on the right here, infill the existing channel, the yellow bar, and we get to build a brand new naturalized creek channel where the blue line is. And that grassed area where the blue wavy line is actually the natural low point of these wetlands. So that's where a creek channel would be. And the existing creek channels are all man-made. They were dug in the 30s to drain this swamp for farming. So we're going to renaturalize it to some extent. So for the project, it's in progress. This is what's happening. We had some delays and false starts while certain things had to be redesigned. We got back into it in December last year, and construction is underway right now. We expect the treatment process to be starting up in the first quarter of next year, and yeah, that construction project will then wrap up shortly thereafter. The reed bed and the wetland channel relocation works can't happen until the new system is up and running. So those bits will happen in the summer of 2026, and that will then complete the overall project. And site photo taken just the other day. Like any construction site, dirt, equipment, and concrete. And as the year progresses, we will see less dirt and more equipment and more concrete. And the big tents will go up in the middle of summer. So lots of activity happening, and that construction will carry on through the rest of 2025. But it's good to finally get going after all these years. So that's the fun part. Now back to the stage 3 LWMP itself. We have to complete a report and submit it to the ministry. It has all of these mandated components. The two in bold I'll talk about in just a moment, infiltration reduction plan. But basically, yeah, everything gets documented and reported in. It's a summary in some regards of what we've done over the years, and also included in there the wastewater treatment plan and budget. So an update of where we're at compared to what we had proposed in 2018. And so that's been a few changes to the plan and certainly to the budget, unfortunately. So we capture all of the up-to-date information in this report. Part of it is a environmental impact study we had to do. The impact of the proposed discharge, and I've bolded the word proposed because even though there's a discharge of water happening to the creek today, the way the EIS is meant to be done is it's assumed that there was no discharge. I'm going to add one of, in this case, very clean water. So obviously our water will be much higher quality than what's going on today. And the first two results here, no surprise, of course, things will improve. We want to make sure that the water in the Trent River is good enough for further use by other parties downstream if they choose to do so, protect the aquaculture in Bain Sound as much as we can. This one here about some dissolved metals in the water, for example, copper, that's actually coming out of copper pipes in the village. So when the water is used as drinking water, it's relatively clean. And then when we receive it as wastewater, it has some dissolved metals in it. This is not a problem from toxicity or so on, but it's just interesting to note that things like this happen. So then the last part is, once their upgrades are done, we then do quite a bit more environmental monitoring than what we're doing today to see how well we're doing, and hopefully that no further treatment is required. It's the treatment will be high quality, and then the reed bed and the wetlands will do further polishing on the water. So we don't know exactly how good it's going to be. We can only tell once we're actually up and running, but it's good enough to meet all the regulatory requirements. So then the wet weather flow. The defining feature for Cumberland is extremely high wet weather flows. And in dry weather, we have 900 cubic meters a day, or 900,000 liters. And in wet weather, it goes up by a factor of 20, and it used to go up by a factor of 30 a couple of decades ago. So the village has done storm sanitary separation works starting in about 2010. The Dunsmuir trunk main being the biggest single project on that. So they've made a difference, but yeah, most towns here in coastal BC, the wet weather peaking factor is in the order of 3 to 1, and just the example here of Courtenay-Comox, they're right in that ballpark of 3 to 1, and the regulatory goal is for 2 to 1. So Cumberland's peaking factor when we have wet weather flows of 20 times the dry weather flow is huge, and it's been quite a challenge for the treatment system to be able to handle that. And what's causing it? So here we go, decreasing order of control, so meaning things that Cumberland can do something about. So we still have some of these areas of old Roman style combined storm sanitary sewers, mostly in the downtown. In some of the non-combined areas, so parts of Cumberland that were built from the 70s onwards, there are still some pipes there that have got cracks and leaks and problems that need to be fixed. That happens as systems age. Illegal roof connections to sanitary sewer. Those unfortunately do exist, and the village will go and do some work to try and identify these, but it does happen, and houses that were built in the old combined areas had no choice but to connect to the combined system. And once you separate it, it doesn't necessarily mean that the house reconnected to the storm sewer. So a roof connection when it rains contributes a lot of water very quickly to the wastewater system, and we want to try and eliminate those. Then points 4 and 5, there's always some infiltration that just can't be avoided. That's why you have peaking factors of 2 or 3 to 1. And the last one, in Cumberland's case, the lagoon surfaces. There is 36,000 square meters of surface, and if we get 100 millimeters of rain, that creates 3,600 cubic meters a day of flow just from rainfall on the lagoon surface itself. And 100 millimeters of rain in a day is a very wet day, but it has actually happened several times in the last decade, and that is our design wet weather event. So just the rain on the lagoons is 4 times the dry weather flow, so it means Cumberland can never get down to a 3-to-1 peaking factor. The best we think we can do is get around to an 8-to-1. If we do work on points 1, 2, and 3, that's probably where we'll land. So since we can't avoid the wet weather flows entirely, we have to deal with them. And the lagoons are still working even when the flows increase. They provide their biological treatment. Our tertiary treatment then will handle 7,200 cubic meters a day, so 8 times our dry weather flow. And then the excess wet weather flow disinfection system I described on that diagram will handle flow above that. It can't go through the tertiary treatment system on those extreme wet days, but it will get disinfected and then go to the creek. And we have nominally 7,200 cubic meters a day of capacity for that, but actually it can handle even more. So the whole idea of this is the system has been designed to protect the environment against water quality impacts from these large flows. We know they're going to exist, so we have to deal with them and make sure this wastewater is treated the best we can and disinfected the best we can before it goes to environment. So given that, we still need to do the separation program. You're not allowed to build a combined storm sewer system today, and you have to work to get rid of combined systems that you have. So part of the LWMP is Cumberland has to commit to separating it. And you can see there, point 2, 14 projects for about $12 million. A very expensive task because you have to dig up roads, replace, install 2 different sets of pipes, reconnect everything. It's quite complex work, so unfortunately it is expensive. And assuming we don't have to do any further treatment works, then this separation is the remaining large capital work for our program. And we are then, so we can't avoid doing it. The question then becomes whether to do it quickly or not. Because we've already taken steps, quite expensive and complex steps to treat the water in wet weather conditions. So the environment's already protected, and eliminating the combined sewer area alone will not eliminate these high flows. Because of those 5 different points, we're going to attack one of them here, but it doesn't mean the wet weather flows are gone. It just means they're reduced. So for that $12 million worth of work, 2 possibilities how to do it. Borrow the money to do it all as quickly as we can and pay it off, or we spread the work out over 20 years and use parcel taxes to pay for it directly. So in this case, we don't borrow and we're not paying interest. So that's the 2 different scenarios. Here is how they look. I've got in there columns saying 50% grant funding. Cumberland will always try and pursue grant funding for these sorts of projects, so which we may or may not get. So the scenarios here, if we do or don't get it, and you can see the bottom line there. If we borrow and go and race ahead to do it and we don't get grant funding, that is an additional $513 per parcel or per house per year for the next 20 years. And then in the no borrowing and all tax column, $330 per parcel per year for 20 years to do the same. And if we can get 50% grant funding, we're down at 165. So quite a range there of costs. And a parcel, by the way, is also a condo unit in a condo building. That's considered a parcel for these purposes, as is a business. Our Wastewater Advisory Committee weighed in on this question too, and this was their position on it. And the bottom line there, the village will always pursue project implementation efficiencies and grant funding opportunities. But the point being here, we think we can do considerably better if we're doing that rather than racing ahead. And what that led to, well, actually, I'll get to what it leads to in a moment. What it adds up to is perhaps more accurate here. Our LWMP process, right? 0.7 million on the planning process, and the projects, you can see the treatment upgrades that are underway, 17.5 million, a very high number. The phase 2 stuff, another 4.3 million. Right, we end up with $22.6 million project. So all of this is being done and has to be paid for before we get to the question of the storm sanitary separation program. So what that means is we have some substantial costs to begin with. These projects, 22.6 million from the previous page, we actually have almost 50% grant funding for them, and we end up with a cost per parcel of $333 to pay off the loans required for the treatment project. We also have annual operating costs that we'll have to pay. The new system is more expensive, can't avoid that. And so an annual O&M cost or a user fee of about $330 per parcel. And then we get to the storm sanitary separation program. You have to add that to the others. And here we are, we've just used the lowest cost option there of $165 per parcel, assuming that we can get 50% grant funding and some efficiencies. And we end up down here at the bottom line, $830 increased cost per parcel per year for the wastewater program. And if we were to go the other route of all borrowing and implement this quickly, you'd basically add $350 per parcel per year to this bottom line. So the one variable that is still up for discussion here is how fast or slow we do the sanitary separation program. And so that 165 could go up to the 513 if we went as fast as possible, and the 830 becomes 1180 if we did that. So that's the question to be resolved. Here's how the rest of the LWMP will play out over the next few months. We've had the public open house, last committee meeting on the 6th, finish our draft report and send it in. We'll get comments back from the ministry and it goes to council in May, and then we submit the thing in finality mid-May, and we expect sign off at the end of the year by the Ministry of Environment, but it might be a little bit longer. So that's the timeline it's going to play out. For members of the public, what do you think? And what's the input we're looking for from you is about this storm separation program. It's the last remaining public input piece. So if you think we should do it fast or you think we should do it slow, then let us know with the feedback form. And just a technical point here about the borrowing. It gets authorized via the LWMP. There is no other assent process that you would normally have for long-term borrowing, because it's the province deems that this has happened through the process of the LWMP. It's one of the few exemptions to the requirements for electoral assent. And the intention is that the municipality can then implement this plan that we've spent years working on and had extensive public feedback. So your last chance to give feedback, please let us know by putting your comments in the feedback form. And once all this is done, Cumberland then gets to create a plan monitoring committee and look at how things are going, and it goes back to the Minister of Environment for reviews, and that should say at 5-year intervals, not just 5 intervals, but 5-year intervals. And so those people who like being on committees will get another chance to do so. And that is it. And once we're done, this is what we'll have. And it's what we intended right at the start, to have a high quality, sustainable system. The resiliency wasn't a word that was in there at the time, but it is these days, and that is adapted to the unusually wet and dry conditions that we experience here. So it'll be a great product once we're finally done. And that is the end of my presentation. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Paul, for that overview and for helping to explain all the many pieces that you guys have worked through over the last number of years. For those of you who are watching, you saw Paul mention a couple of questions indicated on a feedback form. If you're watching this, you're on the Engage Comox Valley /Cumberland-LWMP page. That is where we will post those questions. So it'll be an online version of the feedback form, and we encourage you to share your comments and your questions there. There's also a questions section. So if you have any other questions about anything that Paul's covered today, you can post them there and the project team will get back to you in short order. The feedback that we hear from you will be compiled and considered as the plan is finalized, and then it will form part of the summary of all of the input that we've received that is a part of the draft plan to be submitted to the province for their review and consideration. So, please submit your comments or your questions. Please also feel free to share this video or let friends and neighbors know that this is posted if you think that there are others who might be interested, and if you want to kind of help spread the word about this important topic. So with that, I think we will wrap it up. Thank you again for joining us today. We really appreciate you giving us some of your time, and we hope you have a great day ahead.